and I'm going to invite Riya Shanmugam to start our conversation. Riya, welcome to Thai Silicon Valley's 40 Under 40 series. First of all, congratulations on being named as one of the founders, the rising stars of 40 Under 40 program. How are you today, and where are you dialing in?
Ajay, thank you for having me. It's a real honor. I'm humbled to be here. I'm based in Los Altos, and that's where I'm calling in from today.
Great. When I look at your background, you grew up in India. You had, the classic Indian American journey dream kind of a route to come to here in US. And now you are a founder and CEO of a startup, which is phenomenal. We'll talk about it in a moment. I'm always curious, growing up in India, did you always think you were going to be a founder here in the heart of Silicon Valley?
No. I was raised in a very conservative South Indian town, and just like many Indian parents, the choices were, you can become a doctor, engineer, or a lawyer. And I interestingly loved fashion and fashion designing, and I wanted to go to fashion school. And my dad, I remember saying, "Well, find something useful that could be your hobby." But I, from a very young age, I knew I liked to lead, and that was just part of who I was from a very early age. But as I grew old, I realized that leading with an impact is what drove me. And it's sort of what I have learned about myself over the last decades of working in tech and working in the corporate world. But no, I definitely did not think I was going to be an entrepreneur building a cybersecurity company in the heart of Silicon Valley, which is sort of the place to be if you're in tech, and it's sort of the place to be if you want to build amazing tech companies. But it just naturally evolved to get me there. Most of my career has been in big tech companies, and I've spent a lot of time building amazing teams, working with some incredible people across the companies that I've worked with. And the thing that always made me want to do more was the impact. And impact not in dollars, impact not in, bigger jobs, higher pays, but impact in the number of people that I could touch with whatever it was that I was working with. And to me, that was impact in the number of people that the technology could touch, and that's sort of the birth of Hawks. And if when the technology takes off and when we scale, we would have the opportunity to touch 6 billion of the people that use the internet every day, and that's sort of what gets me going. That's sort of the journey to Hawks.
Very well said. When we think about everything that you said, two things struck me very well. First, lead with an impact.
Yep.
Tell me about what part of your upbringing, maybe there were values, maybe there were some experiences, one or two, that still serve you today in terms of this bigger mission that you have.
Yeah, so see, I grew up very comfortably. My childhood was, very much comfortable in terms of I always got what I wanted, and there was no struggle for money per se. But also along with that came the responsibility to give back, because I was raised in a household where there was a lot of philanthropy that happened, which was part of my everyday upbringing. So I always saw my parents, my grandparents, my family giving back to what they could possibly give back. And to me, that was part of my DNA growing up, and leading with an impact, leading with empathy. Those were all things that were just part of everyday upbringing. Like I would see my mom. She didn't work. She didn't have to go to a job, but she ran the household, and she ran a couple of family businesses that we had. And we had a lot of people that worked under her as part of that. But she always led with empathy. She always led with the fact that there is a human on the other side of the equation. And they all made such a profound impact in who I am today and who I grew up to be as a leader. And the people that have worked with me, the one thing that always stood out in all the feedback that I've received is the empathy that came in my leadership. And I think a lot of that goes back to what I've seen and what I've learned in growing up back home in India.
Phenomenal. That reminds me one of the anecdotes One of my former bosses, he used to always tell me, it's not about only the what, but also about the how. And when I think about and hear stories like, leading with empathy and, caring about that, yes, there is a human on the other side, it's all about the how, right?
Yeah.
Great story. And that led you here to all the different leadership roles. What's interesting about your background, Ria, is you have worked with several of the big tech companies, which people would love to have their names on their resume. So Google and IBM and Adobe. Um, I'm always curious about, operating in a big company environment, even though you are in leadership roles, which you grew phenomenally to, um, always is very different than operating in a startup environment, right? Um, Curious to hear from you, what skills did you actually gain in those big companies that you still use, you found very helpful in your current role as an entrepreneur, where the environment is pretty small?
Yeah. Great question. I use a ton of what I've learned in my career today as an entrepreneur. I think the thing that really helped me as an individual, as a leader, as a person, both professionally and personally, is what I learned at IBM. So fun story. I was doing my MBA and I briefly interned at IBM, and then I went back to school to finish my MBA. So when I came back to it, they hired me back at IBM, and at that time it used to be called the IBM Summit Program. I'm pretty sure they changed the branding of it, but the Summit Program was really a combination of teaching fresh out of college grads how to sell and then how to technically sell. That's sort of the idea behind the Summit program. The first 4 months of the program was about how to sell. And everything that I know about selling, talking to customers, negotiations, influencing stakeholders, how to dress, how to show up, body language, all of that was those 4 months of rigorous training on how to sell. And there might be people that have gone through that program and have found a lot of value in it. For me, it changed my life. It changed the way I talk to people, I interact with people, I talk to customers, I present myself to customers. And that's really been the foundation of a lot of what I've learned. And I've really carried that through in every job that I've had and every customer that I've talked to. It's just been really the bedrock of lessons that I've learned at IBM. The other companies that I've worked for are, Adobe, Google, New Relic most recently. The thing that I learn is customer obsession that comes when you have a lot of resources. You can really obsess over your customers, and that makes a big difference in how your customers perceive you. The ability to build incredible teams, the ability to manage really hyper performing teams, especially when you work at companies like Google. You sit in a room and you look around, everyone around you are so smart and so incredibly capable of a lot of things. And then imposter syndrome hits you. And it's definitely hit me at multiple levels throughout my career. And I sit there wondering, how did I even get here? What did I do to deserve to be in this room with such incredibly talented people? But the reality is, imposter syndrome can sometimes drag you down or it can pull you up. It depends on how you deal with imposter syndrome. To me, it was the thing that helped me the most being at companies like Google or Adobe or New Relic, because it made me want to be a better version of myself. Every time I showed up to a room, I wanted to feel like I belonged in that room. I wanted to feel like I earned my place to be in that room. So I always push myself to be better. But those experiences are, life experiences, and they're gonna be with me forever. And I think I'm gonna carry that to every role that I take on. But those are some incredible experiences that I've had.
Very well said. By the way, a fellow IBMer here, and we might have overlapped during our times. I'm assuming you were there probably during Ginny Rometty's time. So I was there.
Yes, yes.
We should talk some stories offline of those leadership summits. And
Yeah,
I agree with you. IBM's sales program and the leadership program, honestly, they were the best of the best in the industry.
yeah, yeah.
Very well said. You touched upon one important point in your previous answer, resources in big companies. Let's talk about that a little bit more, right? Yes, you are in a big company, you have abundance of resources. I mean, at that time, you might not feel like there is always like, hey,
Yeah.
I don't have enough resources. I have like, 8-figure budget, but that's not enough to run some sales metrics that I have. And all of a sudden, you come in a startup environment, and the story is quite different, right? Um, so let's talk about it, right? How have you adopted those kind of changes, and what has kept you going all of a sudden from 7, 8, 9-figure budgets to, now literally either you are fundraising or either you are, bootstrapping. Um, Curious to
Yeah.
hear.
Um, so I mean, obviously the startup world is very, very different when it comes to resources, when it comes to time, and so on. I mean, number one for us is just ruthless prioritization. You can't really be aspiring to do 10 different things and get all of them done. So ruthless prioritization in terms of what will actually drive us outcomes. So this is something that I remind myself and my team all the time. Actions is not equal to progress. Outcomes equals progress. So what do we need to do to drive outcomes? Just actions alone is not going to get us to the next step. So prioritization that directly aligns with outcomes. The other thing that I have realized, and I'm continuing to build a muscle for it, is the most obvious way to solve a problem is not going to work for us because the most obvious way to solve a problem most likely involves money, resources that a lot of times large companies have plenty of, but small companies don't. So these days, the one thing that we've been practicing as a team is, well, if you've got a problem, right now we are looking for a couple of engineers and we've got to figure out how to go hire the best in class engineers, but also we are a bootstrap startup, and how do we think about hiring the best engineers but also making the financials work for us. And so we always have to come up with creative ways to get access to talent, but at the same time, as a startup, how are you selling the vision, how are you selling the dream, and sort of have that conviction in the company for them to come work for you. Obvious solutions don't work. So we're always thinking around the box, out of the box, side of the box to make it work. But at the same time, prioritizing the most important things because in startups, you can plan for what you want to do 5 months from now, but you may not have a company 5 months from now if you're not focused on what you need to deliver at the end of this month, right? So we're always focused on what do we do now, what are the outcomes, and then looking for the not so obvious solutions to solve those problems.
How do you solve for that when you have to hire engineers? Like, for example, right? I mean, Bay Area or even these days everywhere is a very competitive market for hiring engineers. And how do you sell them to join you?
Um, See, any founder has experienced this, which is if you want to, I mean, this includes even bringing on board co-founders. If, if you're a solo founder and if you have an idea, if you have a vision, and if you want to bring someone on board, the role of a CEO is to always be selling, whether that is to co-founders, whether that's to your team, whether that's to your customers, your investors, your angels. It's always be selling. You wake me up in the middle of the night, I'll be selling and talking about the vision of Hawks because that's literally 100% of my time. But first of all, you've got to have the conviction that you're building something that the world needs today. And you've got to look around and know really well that you're solving the problem that matters the most. And no one else is doing that because sometimes I hear people solving for a problem, whether that is tech and AI, or I mean, tech and AI and legal, or AI and medical, or AI and call it whatever industry. There are already 10 different companies, but how are you uniquely different and what are you solving for? And do you also know the 10 other companies that are in this space building? And I think that journey takes a while for the founder to have that conviction before you can go convince others to build that conviction for you. And it is hard. It's not for the faint of heart. It is hard, but it'll be worth it
It's worth it.
when you're on the other side. It'll be worth it.
It's totally worth it. Well said. Let's talk about your company now, Hawks, right?
Yeah.
Very unique market, but at the same time crowded too. I mean, passwordless is something we have been tempering and tinkering for almost like a decade now, or even more. Um, you have big players, you have small players, big players dominating, small players trying to build a niche. How are you in particular building a differentiation for your product? And you kind of started talking about it a little bit. Might be worth going into a little bit more detail, and feel free to talk about your business and details if you like.
Yeah, happy to. See, identity is a crowded space, and there are lots of proven players out there. There are plenty of new players coming at it from different angles. And if you think about the different waves of identity, we moved from on-prem to cloud, which was sort of the birth of companies like the Oktas and the Ping identities of the world. And then there was another wave that happened around consumer identity. How do you protect the privacy of your users, which is when companies like Auth0 and others came into play. And then now there are these new age companies that are focused on the developer first, API first sort of mindset, composable UI components. The companies like Stitch, Dscope, and others come to mind. But within identity, there are lots of companies that are aiming to approach passwordless in very different ways. Magic links, OTPs, hardware keys, and so on and so forth. See, those things are not secure. Magic links, OTPs, and the amount of phishing attacks that are happening now, it's not the 4,000%. And it's only significantly and very fastly increasing because of AI advancements. Our approach to passwordless is when we think about passwordless, a true passwordless technology is one that is key-based. And you might have heard of this technology called passkeys. And passkeys is fundamentally a very transformative technology when it comes to passwordless technologies. But passkeys have struggled with adoption for a number of reasons, whether that is interoperability, OS dependency, user adoption, and so on and so forth. But the way we'd like to think about it is passkeys, as much as it's transformative and innovative, it's kind of like the first iPhone. The first iPhone was a transformative technology, and it sort of brought together various aspects of handheld devices, but it still lacked some very key features. Like I remember iPhone 1 came out and it wasn't supporting 3G networks. It didn't have GPS. It wasn't allowing third-party apps to be downloaded in your iPhone ecosystem. Those were all now what we think are essentials were not there at that time. The price point was significantly higher. What happened was the version 1, as much as it's transformative, is going to have significant downsides because it didn't think through all the use cases that it has to solve for. And as a result, as much as passkeys are transformative, it comes with its hurdles, which is what we are solving. Hawkx is building the first and only key-based authentication solution, which we think is truly passwordless, but that also overcomes the hurdles that passkeys have posed in terms of OS dependency, interoperability, and adoption challenges for end users, for developers, and for enterprises. That's sort of what we're building. And when we take off, notice that I didn't say if we take off. I know we will take off because the technology is very powerful. But when we take off, the technology has the power to influence every single one of the individuals that uses the internet today.
Amazing story. And for all the listeners, including our investors in the Thai network or globally, this is the time to jump on to Riya's startup now. If you want to ever invest your dollars, you will get a deep discount right now. So let's talk about it, right? Very briefly, Riya, fundraising is a key part of any founder. Like you said, always be selling, always be raising is the other side of the coin, right? Because they are two sides of the same coin. Um, Share your experience in this area. What have you been doing? What's your experience like?
Yeah, so we are three co-founders and we have bootstrapped until now. And we are fortunate enough to have the ability to continue to bootstrap the company for a little while longer. We are starting to look for external institutional funds as we speak. We're just getting ready for it. We don't have a very tightly strapped timeline for money. But we would look for investors that are the right partners for us, that align with with an understanding and the nuance of the technology itself, and that is very well versed in the space. That can open doors that we possibly cannot open it just with money, right? That's sort of what we're looking for. We're looking for the right partner. We are not in any rush, but we're looking for the right partner once we start our external fundraise.
Great. And speaking of the right partner, glad that you are part of the Thai Silicon Valley network. So, at least you have some headway there. And
Absolutely.
we are happy to talk offline with a number of other opportunities we can help you and your company.